Tom, who did you say would be your dream guest on the podcast?
I believe I said Henry of Skalitz. At the moment, my current dream guests are Henry of Skalitz and Lord Hans Capon, otherwise known as Luke and Tom, or Tom and Luke. I must say, because I'm a big fan of the games, it's strange to be sat in a room with you two, considering I've been controlling you and saving you for most of the last couple of months.
He's basically like a simple country boy who starts small and ends big, and like a lot of kind of epic stories.
How refreshing that you're a complete peasant with no skills.
That's why they cast me.
Yeah. Whenever people are recreating things about the character, it's kind of like they're doing it about me.
These like weird, they look like astronaut heads. So you've got the footage from the camera, from the head cam, which is just like almost perfectly round, and it's like fishbowl lens. So your face is doing all this weird stuff on a kind of really rudimentary body, sometimes naked for reasons that I've never quite understood. But like,
do I have to be naked? Yes.
It's like being in MI5, isn't it? And you're not allowed to say what you're working on because the NDAs are pretty tight. I did tell my mum, I'm sorry, Warhorse.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Ready Aim Fire podcast, the stories behind your favourite games and the talented people who bring them to life. Today on the show, we have the wonderful Tom McKay and Luke Dale.
Woo-hoo.
Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you
you
for being here. It's been lovely to have a little chat with you beforehand as well.
Yeah, so we've got obviously loads of questions for you guys. I'm sure it's been a busy couple of months for you with the release of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So I wanted to start with stuff around your acting CV. So you've both got really impressive acting CVs, but you don't have a lot of gaming titles on there, at least compared to some of the other people we've spoken to. So how did you get your first game audition or audition for a game?
Well, this game just came through the same way that pretty much every other audition does, in terms of being a self-tape and not a huge amount of information, which I'm learning is really common for games. It's sort of more common in TV with kind of Marvel type projects, those kind of things where they're incredibly secretive. But my understanding, and you can tell me you know better than me if this is right, but that's really common with games. Often you don't know what it is, and you certainly don't necessarily know what the role is. And that was the case with this to some extent. It was I think just one scene, which I then sent off, and then this kind of second audition was essentially like a kind of full workshop day in Prague where the game's made. And it was kind of funny because I wasn't really sure. Halfway through the day, they kind of said something that made me think that it was that it wasn't really an audition, that they kind of decided in my favour, thankfully. And but I still wasn't completely sure at the end of the day. And then that was it. But by the second half of that day, we were sort of workshopping the character and kind of, particularly with accent and various things, making choices around it. So I was like, okay, this feels positive. And that was it. So it was really similar to TV auditions, really, which kind of makes up the main body of my work at the minute. So yeah, not so radically different. And no sort of performance capture element. I know we've talked a bit about how some auditions, particularly for performance capture, might involve a sort of more physical element. There wasn't any of that, but then our world is very naturalistic, so there doesn't kind of need to be.
That was very different from my experience of the first game, because it did come through as a normal audition like any other. We sent that off as a self-tape. And then I was flown out, and I just left drama school, and that was kind of like me being a deer in the headlights, because I'd never been flown out anywhere. And yeah, I essentially had a quick chat across the table with the top team at Warhorse, and I read a scene with them. And then they shook my hand and they were like, welcome to the team. But my part was much, much, much smaller than Tom's. And I'm not sure, I didn't know you had to do like a full day's workshop. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like a theatre workshop. It was amazing, but it was brilliant creatively and confusing professionally, because I was like, I don't know if I've got this part or not. And but most of it, like I said, or at least a huge part of it, was to do with accents. And I've spoken about him before, but there's this amazing Irishman called John Comer who does a lot of the translation, who is a fluent Czech speaker and obviously a fluent English speaker. So he has this really niche skill where he's not just good at translating, he's really good at translating idiom. So a lot of the lines that people love from the game are obviously beautifully and brilliantly written in Czech, but he's got this amazing talent of converting them into English. And he also has a great ear for accents. So he was the main person across all of that in terms of like fine-tuning it. And we kind of settled on this slightly West Country but relatively non-specific accent, which is actually quite similar. Most non-English speakers can't hear the difference between my voice and Henry, and some native English speakers can. And can you hear it or not? I don't know.
A little bit.
Tom.
Yeah, I suppose it's more like Henry's accent, as you say, is much more like rural, for lack of a better term. But yeah. I must say, like, because I'm a big fan of the games, it's strange to be sat in a room with you two, considering I've been controlling you and saving you for most of the last couple of months. But yeah, what a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you.
So when you went in, you said you didn't get a lot of information. We've heard that from a lot of people, right? Sometimes it's like, man, 40s, like something like that. Did you know that your faces were going to be involved, or did you think it was just voice work, or were you aware that you were also being cast as the face of Henry and Luke? Not Luke, you are Luke.
There's no difference. Yeah, I think I was very aware from the off because it's actually contracted, so you have to sign away your face, and they, that was a very strange thing, because over the years, fan art is a big part of fandoms for video games. I'm very appreciative of the fandom that we have, and they're wonderful. But whenever people are recreating things about the character, it's kind of like they're doing it about me. So that's either sometimes a good thing or sometimes not so good. But back then, yeah, we were aware of it, and I thought it was great because I never really knew that was the thing in video games, But it seemed like a good move because then people would recognize me for the role, and that'd be good for my career, hopefully. But yeah.
I don't know if I did know. I think I definitely knew by the time we got to the contracts, like you said. But if I remember this rightly, and it's a while ago, I think they may have needed a bit more time with my face to decide if I actually wanted it or not. Because I did that workshop audition, and I'm pretty sure I didn't know that. So I knew they were doing facial capture, that they would use my facial movements, but I wasn't sure that they had decided whether they wanted to use my face. And then later on, that definitely became part of the contractual conversation, because obviously it has to for contractual reasons. But I'm not sure they had decided that when they saw me. They took a while, which is totally fair enough.
It sounds like you had, or they gave you quite a bit of influence on the characters. They had you in the room and they kind of
that day
devise
they did.
it a little bit.
And do you know what? Yeah, and that kind of speaks to them. It kind of speaks to their ethos, because they are. I mean, there's not enough time here to say all the good things I have to say about Warhorse, but they're really collaborative. They have this incredibly clear vision and this intense work ethic, but it's really egalitarian as a studio. So I sat in about. I guess maybe 6 months before the release, they do I think it's every Thursday, a company-wide meeting where they'll discuss anything. And on that day, they were discussing the key art. And there was people from all tiers of hierarchy within the studio. And it was a really egalitarian, productive, positive, supportive conversation. And I was like, wow, I don't know that this would happen in the UK. It might say more about kind of British culture than it does about anything about gaming culture, but that's their vibe. That's kind of how they work. It's very collaborative, and right from the top down, they will listen to people's opinion, and that includes the actors. Even things like little line tweaks or whatever. And as we've got to know the characters better, sometimes I flatter myself to think that I would write anything better than they would, because I don't. But just now and again, you might go, this is a bit more idiomatic. It might sit better in his accent or whatever, and they're completely open to that.
Oh, I love that.
That's really cool.
That's brilliant. This is Prague, right?
Yeah.
And am I right? Did you say at the beginning that you were flown out before you knew you got the part to audition?
Well, like I say, I didn't know if it was a rehearsal or an audition. I thought it was an audition because I definitely didn't know throughout most of the day that I had the part, and I'm not sure they did. I think it was actually an audition, but it just felt. I wasn't exactly sure of what we were going to be doing that day, apart from reading a few scenes. If it was a regular audition, you might be in for 20 minutes, you'd read the scenes. But this was a whole day. We went for lunch in the middle of the day with the lead creatives. I had a lovely time, but I was really confused because I was like, I don't quite know what the deal is.
Did they tell you at the end of the day? So did you fly back with the job?
No, they said things that made me. I think it got lost in translation. I think they had decided, but the sort of etiquette of it, because obviously ordinarily it would go through your agent. You'd all pretend. Everyone would look the other way and pretend like it was really normal, but all you're thinking about is, did I get the job?
Yeah, of course.
They weren't being really quiet, hopefully we see you again.
Yeah, exactly. Really nice to meet you. See you again. Oh, really? Oh, no, okay. So They definitely didn't say it emphatically, like I wasn't sure, but I remember there's an amazing woman called Katka. She's not at Warhorse anymore, but she is an amazing producer who was like the kind of legs of the studio for a long time. And she was with me and looking after me brilliantly, as she always did. And I don't remember what she said, but I remember her saying something as we were walking down the street to get in a cab to go back to the airport that made me think it was positive, but it was not like, there were no contracts, there was no like official offer, and then it did go through my agent. That's totally appropriate, that's how it will go. So
I'll leave this going in a minute, but I'm just trying to get this round my head.
Yeah.
So you flew out to Prague on the day,
Yeah.
you auditioned in the day, went out for food with them, and then flew back the same day.
yeah, I think I did. As I
It
remember,
was the same for me
Was
as
it a
well. But they did
traditional-
tell me I'd got the part.
he was much better, you see. There was no doubt with him, but we made us all up.
You could understand. Oh wow, what a cool experience that is alone,
it was nuts.
to be flown out to Prague.
Yeah,
and
which,
back in the day.
which, like Luke said, is not a particularly common thing. Like, you know,
No.
you might do, particularly, this was like pre the days of Zoom as well. So, but even if Zoom had been a thing, I suspect that wouldn't have been the case with this because of that performance capture element that we were talking about. So, you know, they presumably were also looking at the way I was moving. We definitely were in mocap seats because they ended up using some of we like shot some scenes and they were like, okay, we're going to use that. And I was like, oh, cool, I guess that's his accent then because now it's in the game. Yeah.
So they're a relatively small and unknown studio at the time as well. So
Yeah.
it must have felt like, did any part of you think, is this a scam?
I mean, not so much as a scam, but I definitely was like, having not done acting in games before, I had no point of reference. So it was confusing. The one thing that was really palpable, which has been ever since, is the goodwill. So despite my confusion, which was more about me being unfamiliar with that space and it wasn't anything to do with them, what was really, really clear was that their hearts and minds were in the right place. You could just completely feel that. So it never felt like deceptive. It didn't feel like something weird was going on, but it definitely felt unfamiliar to me. I don't know about you.
I had absolutely no frame of reference. And so I was just overwhelmed by the whole thing. And, you know, it was a full studio. They had a budget. You know, it wasn't the budget that they certainly have now, but it was legit. And I was just overwhelmed by it all, to be honest.
I mean, I'm really impressed, like you said, Tom, that they took the time, like they really cared. They flew you all the way out to spend the time with you, to work on it with you. That's just,
It is,
which
I
goes to
think-
show their commitment to
Totally. And again, you guys can tell me because you're much more familiar with it. But I do think that speaks to some extent to games and game development that they had already spent, I think, at least several years working on it before we had even shown up.
Yeah.
So these kind of central characters that were already really beloved to them, it was really important to get it right. Whereas in TV and theatre, to some extent, it all just happens a bit more quickly, which doesn't mean that anyone cares any less, but it kind of escalates much faster. But with this, I think they had time. You know, if we hadn't been right, they would have definitely seen other people, and they had the luxury of time to get that right, because I guess they're then going to be spending however many years with these faces and these voices. So, they were kind of forensic in their detail, and they were right to be.
And that goes across everything that they do. Their sense of tenacity, and it's all from a place of love and wanting to make a really great game. That's the main, MO. And it goes across everything they do. You know, when the announcement trailer we made for the second game, they might talk about this later, but they projected the second game upon the halls of St. Barbara's Church in Kutna Hora, which is a place in which the second game is set. I mean, who thinks of doing that? You know, unless you're just so proud of the thing you've made, so committed to the cause, so effusively excited about the project. That's such a statement, I thought, and that goes across everything they've ever done. They're full of love and passion, and they're just amazing people to work with.
I remember seeing that trailer and being very jealous that Red Aim Fire hadn't shot it. But yeah, I thought it was beautiful. And like the horse riding down the street, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Stunning,
Perfect.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
the
really
whole
good.
thing.
But Luke's right. It was like the brainchild of this amazing guy called Vitek, who essentially he's super young and incredibly bright. But he was young when he played the first game. And so he's a good example of the sort of level of passion that, you know, like Toby, who's in PR, and all the rest of the studio. Everyone is kind of a fan of the game as well as working on the game. So there's this real sense of pride and understanding of it. They really get what it is and what it is they're making. So these quite bold, like relatively left field ideas, particularly from those perspectives that haven't necessarily been done in other games, they know will work because they know what it is that they're making and who they're making it for, crucially.
That's such a good point. They often, as the game grew and the sequel came into being, they would hire in more people, of course, and a lot of those people were
fans
clamoring to work there and sending their CVs and going, the first game was phenomenal. I'm a game developer. Can I work for you? They'd come in and meet them and be like, yeah, you're so passionate. You're really good. Let's have you. And then they end up having their dream job working at this studio. And then that just makes the whole thing better because they're doing it because it's not work. So you get this wonderful team of people who are just so passionate.
A massive compliment to you too then, that they cast you, and the way you talk about them now, they obviously made the right choice for many reasons.
I think they were stuck with this one. So who wants to shot their second?
We already shot it.
Too expensive. We can't go around again.
Has it been 10 years though? Since
10 years.
Near enough, give or take. Yeah, I've slightly lost track.
I think it's 9, but it's nearly 10.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And the period of time filming was kind of back and forth over.
Yeah, very much so.
For the first one, longer for the second, or
yeah,
similar?
definitely. So the first game was about, I think, about 8 weeks-ish of motion capture. And I don't think, if I remember rightly, with the exception of the DLCs, I don't think we did any more performance capture shoots once that was done. With the second game, it's so much bigger. It's got much broader shoulders. So we did that in pieces, and then that was kind of interspersed with the voiceover work, because as one, they kind of dovetail. So we were finishing up the performance capture shoot, they would just pepper in as much voiceover as they could because there was so much to get through. But absolutely, it was sort of interspersed with loads and loads of trips home. There definitely wasn't one piece.
As an actor, I must say, it is a dream gig to get, because the acting world is obviously very precarious. We all know that. You go through long periods without work. And because this has been nearly 10 years of our lives, and it's just this gift that kept on giving. And you're like, right, well, surely we're done now. No, they want us back for another week's work or whatever, after just a month or two. I mean, it allowed me to keep a toe in the acting industry when I thought I was gonna stop after a while. But yeah, that's it. I'm so grateful for that part of it as well.
I liked what you said in the BBC article about when you were doing the sequel and you had to keep finding excuses to go to Prague.
Well, it's like being an MI5, isn't it? And you're not allowed to say what you're working on because the NDAs are pretty tight. I did tell my mum. I'm sorry, Warhorse. I did tell my mum.
You should have told your mum that. That's good.
I mean, there are some exceptions in life, but she, exactly.
There was actually a guy at Passport Control. I don't know if I've told you this, and I've seen him since the second game came out, and I saw him a few times, and he was like, "Oh, hello, Henry," and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And while I was going in to make the second game, he would be like, "Oh, what are you here for? Is it for work?" And you're like, "Well, you're a passport immigration officer, so I can't lie." But also, I mean, luckily I don't have to say what work necessarily. I've seen him about 3 or 4 times, and there's another girl who also works at the airport, who I saw less at that time. But these kind of professional figures that you're not allowed to lie to, who would then ask about, professional things.
Oh, yeah.
But then loads of people around the town, wouldn't they, would be like, "Oh, why are you here?" And you're like, "I just really, really like Prague." I'm just visiting.
But you've seen everything. It's like,
brilliant.
And of course, they didn't buy it at all. They were like, "Yeah, we know what you're doing." Yeah.
Actually, do really like Prague at this point.
Beautiful city, yeah.
I've never been. I think.
Have you not?
It's amazing.
I must be the only person on the couch.
I went when I was super, super young, and then a bit more recently, and I just remember always going, you have to go up to Palace, which is probably quite apt.
Yeah.
And the bridge, when you've got to touch for luck.
Yes.
Something you touch for luck,
There's a dog, and I think I'm right in saying a woman being pushed off the bridge, which is weird.
Wow.
Yeah. I think those are the 2 lucky talismans. Yeah.
What's the story behind the woman? You don't
I've no
know?
idea. You can only tell because it's in bronze, and because they get rubbed so much, they go gold, and it's the dog. And I think I may have made that up. I'm pretty sure I didn't.
You can find out during Kingdom Come Deliverance 3's production. So in that 10 years of association with Warhorse, what would you say has been, both of you, what's your favourite day at work been?
That's a really tough one.
For me, it was definitely the announcement trailer day, because I don't know, the team working on that trailer was absolutely amazing. It was like this well-oiled machine, and the excitement of knowing what was coming for the fans, and the fans had no idea. Many of them had given up at this point that there was ever going to be a sequel, because what Warhorse actually did was, many games will tease the fandom of a project for years, and they'll say it's coming soon, And they end up waiting forever and they get fed up. But Warhorse waited right until the very end of production, kept it very secret for a very long time, and then said, right, you've only got a few months to wait now, which is a great way to do it. But to keep that quiet, of course, we shot it, the announcement trailer, I think we started shooting every day at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Night shoots are brutal as well.
Yeah, but for complete secrecy in this church.
Until they projected it.
Until
they were like, we need to keep it on the down low. And they were like, you've got massive images of our face.
There's someone
outside of the church.
There was someone walking their dog at like 5 a.m. who probably saw it, but hopefully they don't play the game. So yeah, I mean, that was such a special week shooting that, and the passion of it all, and the excitement of it coming, and that was my favorite day. Yeah.
What about you, Tom?
Do you know what? It's sort of an impossible question to answer because the journey of it has been so broad, I suppose, for me, in that not having a true understanding of what it was I was working on, but being like, I guess the lead creatives absolutely knew what it was creatively they were trying to do, but nobody knew if anyone would play it or take it to heart as they did. So that was the kind of kernel of the first game, and then there was a hiatus through COVID, which was obviously a weird time for everyone, but we knew luckily it was coming. And then the sort of kind of steep ramp of the second game through all the things like Luke was talking about, the announcement videos, and the sense that this like snowball was getting bigger and moving faster, but underpinned the whole time, and this has never changed, by these like amazing, smart, kind people with whom I've had so many like amazing experiences. So, I've said this before, but the word family gets kicked around so much in our industry, and very loosely and often sentimentally, but it really is that they are very much like a family. And I've never worked with people for this long. I've never worked on a character for this long. I've never worked with a body of people for this long and got to know them so well. So it's kind of a cumulative experience over that entire time. And for that reason, I know I sound like a politician, but that's why it's sort of impossible to answer, because I tell you what I will say, that this, like, Prague itself is like littered with so many gorgeous memories. I'd done a few jobs before this, but particularly KCD2 and KCD related memories. And it's really weird, like I'll walk around a corner or into a shop or out of a restaurant or whatever, and it'll trigger these like memories from the first game or from like partway through the second game, or right, on the day that we did the release party. And I don't have any other city in my life, apart from the city I live in, that has that kind of triggering effect on all these like beautiful memories that are genuinely exclusively positive. Like, obviously there were harder days, obviously there were like challenges, but there was never a time where I was like, I'm not enjoying this, I don't want to be here. Like, literally never. I can say that with total confidence. And so Prague and that studio and obviously this game and these characters genuinely have that kind of a really special place in my heart, and that's that's not PR speak, that's the truth. Yeah. So that's why I don't have a favourite day.
Yeah. And like throughout I was obviously working on it throughout my 20s, and your 20s can be quite tumultuous and difficult at times, where you're trying to figure out who you are, what your career is, make it work, and to have that hub that I could go back to every few months and work with these amazing people and do the thing that I most love was so special. So I'm always going to be really grateful for that as well.
They couldn't get better answers than that. Wow. I'm really sorry to take it back a second, but I'm just so intrigued, if you don't mind me quickly asking, about the motion capture, performance capture side.
Yeah.
So first and second, it doesn't sound like you did it all together at any stage. You didn't do the head cams and the sound for either of them together. It was separate.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah, so they're like completely separate. So and also really different experiences, because the performance capture, so we didn't have head cams on the first game, but we did on the second. But the kind of standing around in lycra, acting with other actors, all of that element in the studio was totally separate and is much more collaborative and much more like theatre, really, because you're kind of imagining all the set. The voiceover is really solitary, so it's like in a booth, generally like months, if not years after the performance capture. And it's creatively, it's a really different experience, and like much more grueling, but definitely rewarding, but in really different ways. You kind of doing like exceptionally long days, and not with other actors. Generally, the stuff that I laid down was often, I didn't have the other side of the conversation. So you're sort of projecting what you're going to be getting back, and wholly reliant on whoever the director is that day, which is quite weird. Like that's really unlike theatre and TV. I couldn't necessarily say I enjoyed one more than the other, but the performance capture is probably easier because you're just with other people chatting. So you get a lot for free that you have to kind of mine it a lot more. I did, at least, with the voiceover.
Did you have the reference footage or the finished footage, visuals in front of you when you were doing the voice?
Bits. sometimes, but like really, really crude. So like nothing like, because it's incredibly cinematic. What they've done is so visually stunning. Nothing like that. So these weird, I don't quite know why they're there or how they work, but these like weird, they look like astronaut heads. Yeah. So you've got the footage from the camera, from the head cam, which is just like almost perfectly round, and and it's like fishbowl lens, so your face is doing all this weird stuff on a kind of really rudimentary body, sometimes naked for reasons that I never quite understood. But like,
do I have to be naked? Yes, you can tell.
And so you'd see that, and you'd see like bits of what was around it, but it was really rudimentary. Just so you had like, I remember there's a beautiful sequence early on where Henry's fallen down off this cliff and Hans helps him, and he's having, because he's really messed up, he's having all these flashbacks to stuff, traumatic stuff that had happened in the game before. And it's a brilliant, really subtle way of like bringing on new players to the game and also reminding old players what happened in the story. But narratively what it is this kind of weird, like almost punch-drunk flashback sequence. And I remember seeing the crude version of that and being like, oh, I have like a tiny sense now. I mean, nothing like what it actually looked like, but I was like, oh, I think they're doing something really special. But when I finally actually saw that, I was like, wow, I did not realise it was this special.
The gift that keeps on giving with games, isn't it? And then suddenly, like years later, you see the end product that you're in and you're like, what? Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That's really interesting. The way they did that. And then there wasn't much change between how they decided to film it for the first and the second. You kind of did the same.
Big difference was with, like Tom said, the head cams. So facial capture was not present in the first game.
Right, of course.
So it didn't really matter what we did facially at all. But then with the second game, it did. And it was an extra layer of process when you're getting into the suits, because you would have to put on this makeshift kind of head cam that actually Warhorse had fashioned themselves. And it's also very uncomfortable, isn't it? Yeah. To wear for an entire day. It really
is. Listening, Warhorse, put some padding.
They do, but it doesn't seem to matter.
Really,
yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And but then you've got basically like a GoPro camera right there in front of you the whole time, and lights as well projected onto your face, and then dots here all over, so that they can, map out in post every single movement that your face is making in accordance with your voice and everything. So that was fresh and new for the second game, and I personally think that was such a great move for them to make, and I think it's a really important piece of technology, especially for actors, because I mean, it does matter what you do, and every little eyebrow raise and stuff like that is seen, and you're like, wow, okay, they've nailed that.
Yeah, especially when you're playing kind of real world naturalistic characters like this, you can, a bit like a close up in TV, you can do something really nuanced that you couldn't do in theatre, and that really facilitates that. And we couldn't do that to the same extent in the first game, could we?
No, it doesn't come across really in the first game. Of course, this is obviously a budgetary thing that they didn't have, and I just felt that was the one thing about watching and playing the first game that I was a bit disappointed by. I was like, I'm not sure the facial performances are really up to scratch, because they did all of that in post, which I'm sure for them isn't that fun.
No. Yeah, I know, right?
Like it must be kind of annoying to have to do every single performances.
Wow.
Yeah. So I never quite knew how they did that. But yeah, they just had like still cameras from a distance.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I'd say, as an actor, obviously, when you're not wearing like a rig on your head and you're just in a TV show or theatre, obviously you're acting with your face, but you're not sitting and thinking about it. Because you went from Kingdom Come 1, where you knew it didn't matter, to 2, where it does matter. Did you actively think about, like you were saying about, I should throw in an eyebrow raise here, or was it reverting to like the more naturalistic form of acting?
I was aware of it. I don't know about you. I definitely found, because you can go and see what has just been recorded. So quite quickly, we became aware of the sort of how much of an asset that was. There are certain scenes, like there's stuff with the character that I play, his family, which are like real kind of anchors of the story, because terrible things happen to them. Not a spoiler, because it happened really early in the first game. But and they appear in a different capacity, which would be a spoiler for the second game. And that is kind of like what in TV terms would be like a really simple tight two shot of two people chatting. And in those scenes, it was especially helpful, because you're like, you don't have to project anything massive. If it's kind of the heart and soul type stuff, which it absolutely is in our game, it just makes your job a lot easier. And I definitely I was so happy that they had made that decision. And I think we did realise quite quickly, didn't we, how helpful that was going to be. And it just makes your job easier in a way, because you can just play it honestly, and the camera and the technicians do the work for you in a way.
Yeah. But at the risk of sounding very, very actory here, so I do apologise in advance. But I do think when you're performing in anything, I mean, the bottom line is that you just have to play the scene honestly, and you just have to give it yourself. And whatever comes out, comes out. So even when we were working on the first game, it wasn't like I wasn't trying with my face. I mean, you're just playing it. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, with the second game, even though I was aware of it, because you can't not be, you've got this camera right in the forefront of your vision and lights in your face. So you're very aware that it's all being captured in a way that you wouldn't be aware of that in a film. But you're actually, if anything, trying to ignore that and just play the scene honestly, and hopefully you do well and it comes out okay.
They are physically quite restrictive though, because they're massive. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're probably the same as the ones you work with, but like in terms of scenes of intimacy, combat scenes and all that, yeah, exactly. You can't, so they're really helpful with like nuance until they're not, when you're like actually trying to get close to someone and you're like, oh, this is kind of awkward.
Whenever the's like a somewhat intimate scene, or you have to get close to someone or hug, it's almost like you're a deer with antlers. Kind of like, it's crazy.
That makes me think, I'm going to say chin straps. Does that mean anything to you?
We didn't have chin straps.
You didn't?
No, we didn't.
I've seen them.
What's a chin strap? Because I thought you meant like chin strap beards.
They're very flattering. So it's kind of what I've done sometimes is you do the scene and then maybe, let's say it's an intimate scene that turns into a fight, let's say. So you'd run it through with the head cams and then you'd do it again with a lovely little capon with a little chin strap. So you've got your little dots on your cap to reflect the lights to capture,
like
and then
rugby,
you kind of get, tussling
exactly that, yeah,
and get in kind of thing. And so I was just wondering, having done a game from 2014 to then 2018, or whenever you recorded.
So 2016.
16 you recorded.
Yeah, and then the second one, I think it was like 2020 actually, that we sort of started. It was just once the doors opened up post-COVID, when we were allowed to go back, we went back. So it was around then, yeah.
So did you get to do, because obviously medieval time, I'm guessing there was lots of fights and swords, etc. Did you get to do them in both, or did the stunts come in the second one and do them, or how did that work?
It was a bit of both on both. So where it was, I mean, more on the second one because it was just more elaborate in lots of, like technically and in other ways. We did what's appropriate and safe and not what's not. And they were really good about that. I mean, for very obvious reasons. And the whole like, we do all our own stunts. You go, well, maybe sometimes you shouldn't, because actually there's a reason why there's a reason why there's stuntmen, and they've got a job to do and they do it really, really well. So then they would do it. But it was a bit of both, wasn't it? Like,
it was. There was, and that makes sense, like just economically, because why get us trained up to try something and spend money training us up when you can just get the real guy in to do it on the day
and potentially get hurt at the end.
Yeah. Didn't get hurt. No, I mean, but there was an occasion where I had to do quite a fairly elaborate fight sequence, and they asked me, and they were like, "Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" I mean, I didn't do all this stage combat at school for nothing. Like, let's use it. And we did, and it was great. I kind of messed up my jaw a little bit in the process, but that's fine. But then in terms of sword fighting, that's really, you really got to know your stuff for that. You'd have to train for years to be believable in that. So I don't think that would be a good idea to give us the swords for that,
Also, the swords, we probably wouldn't hurt each other actually, because they're literally like kids' foam swords. So like the props, is this true of like all performance capture jobs?
The
props are hilarious. Yeah, there's this big, along one wall of the studio, there's this really funny, essentially cupboard full of like all the things that can be anything. So like massive tankards and, shields and, obviously swords and all that stuff, but they're, for very good reason, they're all really soft. So when you're, if you're playing, and a big part of our narrative is that the character I play is trying to seek his father's sword, and it's sort of like a metaphor for revenge and all this sort of stuff. But the sword in that case is just a big foam sword.
Half the battle is just trying not to laugh at the things we have to do, basically. You get through that, you're fine.
You get to use your imagination so much, don't you, within that world? But I also found interesting, taking on my non-gamer hat here, I didn't know much about the game from a gamer's point of view, and I was reading up on the brilliant notes, and it said that they're based on real characters. Are yours based on a real character?
So mine is, my guy is a real guy that did exist.
Oh, wow, cool.
You can even go to his grave, actually, in the Czech Republic, but your character...
Yeah, he's fictional, so he's sort of, being the playable character, he's sort of something of an everyman in terms of... fitting into this world, but that world is very much built around historical figures, and it's kind of part of the identity of the studio, which is that it's a Czech studio, peopled mostly by Czech devs who are incredibly proud of their history and this part of her history, led by Dan, sort of lead creative. And so there are all these characters, including like Jan Žižka, who's this iconic character. Most Czech people know who he is. I didn't, shamefully, but he comes in the second game. And so the world of it is very real, but, the person in the middle of it that you're playing as isn't. And I think that's deliberate in terms of going, he's basically like a simple country boy who starts small and ends big. And, like a lot of kind of epic stories, that's the kind of arc. And so I've never asked them this, but I'm assuming that was deliberate. If it was based on a real person, you probably lose something of that. Whereas it's given that the player gets to make the choices and kind of decide who they become, him being a sort of everyman makes that easier.
In the industry, there was, I think, a trend for a long time of making you the hero from the beginning of the story in games generally. And so when this game dropped, there were a lot of people that said, how refreshing that you're a complete peasant with no skills.
That's why they cast me. Took them a whole day to write that up. I'm from Birmingham. I love Birmingham. Very proud to be from Birmingham, genuinely. Cut that out.
Oh, Solihull.
Yeah.
My best friend's from
I was
Solihull,
born
so
in
yeah,
Solihull
Birmingham.
Hospital, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, carry on.
But yeah, so like you have to work your way up from absolutely nothing. You have everything taken away from you from the very beginning of the game. And part of the joy of the game is slowly grinding away to become something more, which is probably more in alignment with most people's experience of life. Most people don't land on Earth with everything. I certainly didn't. But and I think that was part of its charm, wasn't it? Yeah.
I like the fact that therefore it's a universal game, the everyman. But yet, if you're from Prague or from the Czech Republic, you can enjoy it for all these other reasons.
Yeah. And they're also really forensic about not just portraying that history, but portraying it honestly. And so, their research is really forensic, and they take great pride in that. As they're absolutely right to, but they probably could get away with not doing that if they didn't want to. But that's sort of part of it, kind of symbolises their passion and their attention to detail, that every front is covered. There's somebody making sure that it's the very best it can be. And in this case, historical accuracy. That's them to a T.
I love the dirt system. So it's like most games don't have a dirt system, but
What's
basically, I don't know if that's the technical name. Sorry, Warhorse was probably like a really technical name for it. But basically, you get around a lot on foot, right? You can do, but it's muddy tracks, so you'll get muddy, and your clothes will be dirty, and you'll start to smell, and people will treat you differently.
Oh, cool!
But
that's how you smell.
As you get, more powerful, if you have a horse like Herring or Pebbles, I have Herring team for the win.
I'm disappointed.
You're on a horse, right? So you're riding around, so you get less dirty, so you don't have to clean as much because you're effectively riding around like a noble would. So there's like this whole tiered system around like you can dunk your head in a big bucket of water to get the worst off, but otherwise you have to go to a bathhouse and get like properly like perfumed water and cleaned by lovely ladies.
Even that trough that you find that has water in it, it will say, this trough has washed you as much as it can.
Yeah.
You must, if you want to get really clean and wash all your armour, you need to go to a bathhouse and they'll clean your armour for you. It's like the detail is absolutely insane.
I think it was ever so slightly broken in the first game because I found it really annoying where I'd like go to a bathhouse, pay all my money, get cleaned, all my clothes repaired, and then walk to the end of the street. And I was like, oh, for God's sake. I know, like there's much more like intuitive in the second game. It is great. And I forgot at one point in the second game that I'd just been in a big fight. And then I went into like a really important cutscene and was just covered in blood from my head to toe. And no one's reacting. But,
they've really taken that and run with it because I think, they listen to their fans. They love and are very respectful towards the fan base, who are a huge engine of this whole thing really, and we very much feel the same, that they have an incredible passion and a drive, and they knew that from the first game that was something that people loved, that they found hard and frustrating but actually unique and really rewarding about this game. So they really took that and ran with it, and that's why those features in the second game are so much more detailed and elaborate, even to the point we were chatting earlier about how you have an interaction with an NPC and it will have consequences maybe really far down the line, and that's kind of true of every corner of the game. There's somebody somewhere in that amazing building working to make it as kind of nuanced and detailed as they can. My sense is, and you can all tell me, but my sense is that's not necessarily true of every game. I don't know, but...
Yeah, I think that's probably totally fair to say, yeah. I mean, a good thing to compare it to was like the Oblivion remaster.
I just played that.
Have you? I'm really jealous. I love Oblivion. So Oblivion was Oblivion was a game that I like played when it came out, 2005, 2006. Loved it. More so than Skyrim for me, it was always Oblivion. Had no idea they were making a remaster. I don't think most people had an idea they were making a remaster. And then they did the same thing, like, bam, it's available, you can get it now. But one of the questions that people were asking was, are you going to leave all the glitches and bugs in? Because there were so many glitches and bugs in Oblivion that made it hilarious. And they have. And it's like great. So it looks prettier. So I respect that they've like taken the things that, like we were talking about before recording around things that were a frustration in one game. Don't remove it completely. Like you can amend it and fix it, but don't completely get rid of it.
Exactly. So it's knowing what's like endearing and knowing what's annoying, and they definitely, I mean, because they know their audience so well, they definitely got that right. So they, they've retained what was helpful to retain, but they got rid of all the stuff that was problematic, and they're obviously right to do that. So
what's lovely about a game is when you hand it over and it's finished, the fans sort of give it a new life, and their reaction to it breathes new life into it. So of course, with the first game, the biggest line, of course, is "I feel quite hungry," because he says it so much. And maybe Warhorse didn't intend for him to be hungry all the time, but of course, that's what the gamers absolutely loved about Henry. So he's always bloody hungry, and
that's why they gave me the role. That's at the end of that
day. So, Kez, for your benefit, in the second game, they've added it as a war cry. So when you're having a fight, you can press a button, and he goes, "I'm quite hungry."
I love that.
So they knew that they loved it, so they were like, "Let's make it a war cry." That's great.
Yes, listening to the fans, brilliant. Yeah.
There is a dense roadmap for the game, so more like DLC and stuff. Are you allowed to talk about any of that, or probably not?
Sorry.
I have no idea.
Well, I think so. Well, they've announced them.
We can say that. Is that right?
We don't know.
Wait. This is perfect. This is perfect. Okay.
Actually, or maybe this is us bluffing.
I've no idea.
Actors.
How many DLCs are coming, guys?
I've no idea.
Cool.
I've no idea. We have started working on them. They have definitely said publicly, I know for sure, we've done motion capture on it and quite a bit of voiceover, but there's more to do. And they have announced the roadmap of like when those things will be released, I think.
I can't remember the exact name of the DLC, but the one that is a murder mystery in a monastery, I know has caught the eye of the man sitting out of frame over here, Frank, other co-founder of Ready and Fire, because his favourite movie is The Name of the Rose. If you ever remember that film?
I'm old enough to remember that film.
Yeah, so there you go. So if you haven't seen it, it's very good. It's a murder mystery set in a monastery. Sean Connery and Christian Slater.
Oh, okay.
So
I'd love that.
Is it anything like that?
I know the film, I've never seen it, so I don't know.
Who's Sean Connery and who's Christian Slater?
I don't know. We're not saying anything about DLCs.
Okay, good.
You guys do look super like you could be brothers, though, which doesn't relate to the
We're
story.
sort of becoming the
a
same
lot.
person, Slowly. We were asking about this earlier. Like, we're spending so much time together. Like, we've definitely started wearing the same clothes, clearly, as evidence to it.
Oh, yeah.
But we're just gently morphing into one person.
This is 10 years. 10 years of friendship. That's amazing.
I'm going to ask you a question that is going to sound a bit silly, and it is a bit silly, and it might not make sense, but do your best. So, could Henry of Skalitz and Lord Hans Capon beat a single gorilla in unarmed combat?
Oh, this is like the X conversation, right? Probably not.
Definitely not. Like, definitely not. They're quite handy, though. They are good in battle. That is one thing you can say about the characters.
Yeah, loads of weapons.
Oh, they've got,
we've got firearms in the second game.
Yeah,
So if we had like,
what weapons have we got?
With the trebuchet, we could.
Trebuchet, definitely. Trebuchet could beat anything.
With a hand cannon, we probably could. Any other weapon?
Well,
is
you say
the gorilla's
that.
gonna-
Have you tried firing that hand cannon?
It's the most
bloody
hilariously
awful.
bad weapon.
It's awful. It takes you about an hour to load up, and then you shoot, and it doesn't even hit the target.
And you have to be like standing. Yeah, you have to be like standing next to them.
Yeah.
When you're doing like it's like an ambush. Spoiler alert. But I had to like walk up to them while all the guards were sort of looking at me confused as I loaded this thing, and then no one reacted because I don't think they knew what it was. Yeah, I think I still missed.
It's a crazy weapon because you're also running the risk of it blowing up in your face. Yeah. So, you might, it's like kamikaze. It's a counterintuitive weapon.
Is that very much what your character would say?
Yeah, probably.
Brilliant.
As I say, no distinction at this point.
It's a miracle it stuck around, really, and they didn't just like throw it in the bin and say, let's go back to bow and arrow or crossbow.
Well, they were really excited about that period in history being the first firearms, and so they were really keen on bringing that in. I think they wanted to do it in the first game, but again, they didn't have the scale. But I'm really glad they brought it in. I just wish it worked. That's all.
The interesting thing, as always with them, it's like obviously fun and like an interesting historical detail, but they also focus on what it does to the characters, which I love. In like when we started talking about it, they were like, well, just imagine if like the history of weapons to that point has been, you know, swords and all the rest of it, and suddenly this like witchcraft comes into your life. Ooh, yeah. and I was like, that's when it gets really interesting as the actor, that you're like, oh yeah, it's a bit like probably not unlike AI for us, where this like amazing thing enters the, you know, your universe, and it has like insane power, but you're also afraid of it, but it might also help you do things that you want to do, and in this case being a kind of something very violent, and how that would feel as an individual. And that stuff I found really interesting, because I hadn't thought about that. We know to some extent what the end game of like firearms are, sadly, but like at that moment of history, it was like, this is this brand new crazy thing that not everybody understands or knows how to use, or knows what it is, and all the characters respond differently to that, you know, for those reasons. And that's them being brilliant, because it's not them going, oh, that'd be funny to have a few guns. They're going, what does that do to everybody?
Yeah, there's a really the stakes. There's a really great quest where they see this big cannon that's loaded up with gunpowder for the first time ever, and it well, no spoilers, but you know, something bad happens, and just that sense of, oh my God, we've never seen this. What is this? But you know something bad is about to happen, so you're all bracing yourselves. It's just a really great challenge for an actor to do. Yeah,
because in the first game it was Brian Blessed was the engineer, wasn't he? Did you get to meet Brian Blessed?
Yeah,
I never did. But you were there all the time.
He was absolutely lovely, and he was so game for it, and so kind of, you know, he's a very well known man, and the game was just this random thing that nobody knew quite what it was at that point. And he was so fun, and so I think everything you need in that environment, which is somebody who's committed, creative, clever, but like game for a laugh, you know, which, because our game has like a really fun sense of humour as well, of which he was very much a part. And he absolutely ran with it. He was a lovely, lovely man, and he was brilliant in the game as well. So yeah.
Was that building the trebuchet, wasn't it? I think.
Yes, I think so. It's such a long time ago now.
That was his role. Yeah.
There was a scene I saw. Adrian Boucher.
Yeah.
He put a clip on. We did Final Fantasy together for quite a long time back in the day, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it was a big chunk of his bits, and there was a bit with somebody with the apple on their head, shooting the apple off the head. It was hilarious. Yeah. It was brilliant and really realistic.
He plays Jan Žižka, who's that really iconic like warrior, essentially. But it's a really good example, because you go, it's a character who could just be like an alpha dog doing all the tough things, and he does those things. But he's also really fun. I mean, he's a brilliant actor, which really helps. And but he's also light and kind and funny and sensitive and all the rest of it. And so they draw they you know, history just tells you of the kind of badass, but actually what they wrote and then he performed so brilliantly is this really three-dimensional, nuanced, real person that you actually care about and get on board with, which is so much more interesting than just like, rah, you know, you get all that, of course you do, but they just build brilliant characters, and he plays that character so brilliantly.
And then watching those cutscenes all together, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I want to play this game now. You know, I want to try my best to get through levels to see all these brilliant scenes.
Present company accepted. I think Jan Žižka's the best character.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Maybe even great. Present company included, I think.
Whoa.
Wouldn't get that far. What's the strangest fan experience you guys have ever had? And also, as an additional question, do people like shout out your character names and be like, hey, Henry, hey, Hans? Yes. Like, yeah.
The strangest was probably early on, when after the release of the first game, but when it was still quite contained and its fan base was, as it still is, like very much Czech based, was that often people wouldn't realise it was based on a real person's face. So if I was walking down the street in Prague, not all the time, but relatively often, people might hear me and sort of look, because they would, and then see my face, and then put two and two together or not, and be like, either this man has just time travelled from like, you know, 14th century, or it's a real person. But it would really freak people out. And I think partly that's because of the like wholly immersive nature of gaming. It's not like seeing someone on telly or in a play or whatever. They've kind of had your ear in their ears intimately for like, in some cases, hundreds of hours, and sort of pretended to be you, which is not the same as other media. And so it's really, I think, incredibly weird for them. The sort of flip positive side of that is that in terms of fan experience, which is not weird but is really gorgeous, is like, because of that intimacy, people will be really open and honest about, you know, and I know this is true of lots of games, but, you know, mental health issues and the extent to which the game and the characters have got them through really difficult moments of their life. And I'm very aware that is true of lots of games. But because COVID was pitched in the middle of these two games, which was a tough time for all of us, people are very front foot about sharing that, and I love that, and it's sort of a really positive backswing to this experience that I hadn't expected and hadn't had really in other stuff I've done. People will be like, well done, I enjoyed the play or whatever, but it's not quite, it doesn't get under their skin necessarily in the same way, and that was a really lovely surprise for me.
Yeah, I just went on a trip across the southern states in the US, and I went with two of my best mates. We did Alabama and New Orleans, and we're in Mississippi, all these places. And when we were in New Orleans, I was standing in a queue to get tacos, and these three lads behind me were sort of like talking amongst themselves and kind of looking at me, and I was like, they're gamers, and I just said it. All right, boys, al dente's fortuna, and they were like, no way, it's you, oh my God. And I just couldn't fathom that, just a month had gone by since the game was released, or 2 months had gone by, and like, I was standing in this queue in New Orleans, and these people knew who I was. I just couldn't, this is crazy to me. And it just goes to show how popular this game has been, and one of them called his boss and was like, I want to get my boss down here because he loves you, and I was taking pictures with him. I was like, this is crazy. But as Tom says, this game has such a profound effect on the people that play it because it's so immersive and you spend so much time with the characters, and there's that added layer. Like if it was just an actor in a film, that'd be one thing, but like people kind of stare at you and go, you look like him. But it's like, you're not digital, but you're real. So there's that added extra weirdness.
Where's your horse?
So there's that added extra weirdness where they're like, God, you're him, but you're not. So yeah, that was crazy as well. And I got recognised quite a lot in America, and I was like, this is mad. It's mad.
The gaming goodness, the brilliant side of games. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me in the least because I think like I haven't yet completed it. I'm still at 80% of the way through, but I genuinely think it's game of the year, and I'm not just saying that because I don't say that to everyone. But I do genuinely think it's game of the year. Like the way it's built upon the first game, the second game is just a crazy experience that I'm loving playing. So yeah, congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. It would. I've said this before, but like if that did happen, which would be amazing, it would be such a validation of their efforts because we, as we were saying earlier, we come and go. We're like dipping in and out. They were there for years before we arrived, and every time on those trips, it's like this engine room over 2 floors with like hundreds of people now working on this thing, and so that it would be lovely. Mostly for that, and I mean
for
that
their
genuinely.
sake.
The whole team is just like
they deserve it because they're so hardworking. Like they're absolutely, and they're just wonderful, good people doing it for the right reasons. Like they definitely deserve it.
Warhorse rule.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they
rule.
They do.
I feel like we haven't even touched on the writing, the production company, all the other things that you guys do. So we're going to have to get you back on at some point if you'd ever come back.
Yeah, maybe we could get you guys back on when the DLC is out, and we can actually we can talk about it.
Something interesting.
Getting you in trouble.
Apart from sitting here awkwardly avoiding questions.
Thank you both so much for giving us some of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone for watching. This has been the Ready Aim Fire podcast. We'll see you on the next one.